Matthew Deagle, my oldest son, was there cheering on when I called the lying king, not lying, L-Y-I-N-G. That guy is just heading out of office. The very incompetent destroyer of America, abominator, and all of his so-called legacy is going to be swept away with his executive orders and his stupid policies for Iran with $150 billion, open borders, the TPP, the Marrakesh so-called climate summit of the United Nations trying to talk about CO2 as a death gas from hell as part of the carbon-oxygen cycle. Matthew, you've got a summary of what you see happening. It's not just an American thing, Brexit in Britain. This is a movement by people of multiple nations around the world rejecting what I call a form of globalism that's very evil and very destructive of nation states and peoples. Tell us what you think.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm amazed that all of the programming, all the mind control, the education system, the brainwashing, the endless propaganda and slander from the media, the endless propaganda and slander on the Internet, every mainstream media source in the U.S., virtually everyone collaborating with the DNC directly to field questions to the DNC before Wolf Blitzer asked Donald Trump questions during his interview with Donald Trump alone, not during a debate, during an interview with him alone, the talking back and forth to veto articles with the DNC, the Huffington Post, Daily Beast, Salon.com on the Internet, all slandering Trump incessantly, every day, attacking Trump as being the new Hitler, as being a sexist, a racist, etc. I'm amazed that despite all of that, the American people, on average, are not dumb enough to fall for it and have not succumbed to the brainwashing.
Yeah,
I'm proud of America. This is restored.
I'm proud of America.
Restored because you see, through their control of the media, they've created the illusion that the average person now is a social justice warrior, is a fanatic, is one of these pseudo-peaceniks and anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-Western civilization people, when in fact that is not the case, and the average American didn't fall for it.
Right.
They are not anti-Russia as well. They've created a similarly slanderous image of Putin, which is totally unfounded, just as the image of Trump that they've created is, and people didn't fall for that either. I want to say secondly, so first of all, yes, my first statement is that I think this restores some faith in the American people, in my opinion. This shows that, in the end, these people are not democratic, although Hillary Clinton likes to imagine herself to be the democratic candidate, the one who's tried to bring about democratic revolutions in the Middle East, and Trump is supposedly a fascist. Well, guess what? Majority rules in a democracy, and the majority voted for Donald Trump. At least the majority of the Electoral College based on our system. So you have a problem with our system, then, hopefully they don't reform that. But overall, we could see Trump winning by a landslide early on. We could see the grimaces on the faces of MSNBC.
Yeah, there's almost
the grimaces on the faces of CNN.
Yeah.
And I myself, Trump has his flaws. He's not a perfect guy. He's not 100% the ideal candidate, but he's definitely miles better than Hillary Clinton. Now, I want to say something else, and that is that I think James Comey deserves a medal for coming out with that email information shortly before the election. I think he did some damage to Hillary Clinton, and instead of being fired, I think he deserves a medal, because I think he knows, as director of the FBI, how genuinely serious the threat of ISIS is. How it is so large and so widespread and so fast-spreading that the FBI is not competent to deal with it. And if the influx of immigrants came that Clinton wanted, if we had a president who took $1 million from Saudi Arabia while her own DNC emails for insiders themselves state that Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, funded ISIS, that the government of Qatar funded ISIS, while she sent arms to Qatar and took money from both governments.
Right.
You see, I think Comey knew himself that the open relationship with Middle Eastern countries that Clinton wanted would be devastating to any attempt at anti-terrorism. as being in charge of that himself, he'd be better informed than most people about just how bad the threat is and how fast ISIS is spreading in the U.S.
Right.
I see new arrests. I see articles, there's news articles publicized about new arrests every week. So I assume the FBI is flooded with information about ISIS cells in the U.S.
Exactly. Matt,
and they simply can't stop it.
Okay, Matt, hold for a
second. The only way to
second.
stop it is something like what Trump wants to do.
Exactly. Now, I want to hear from Harley, because he's over in Berlin, and from a distance he can see things on an international scale that we don't see. We've talked about a lot of these policies because...
may I say something about Berlin very quickly, though? Germany, I see today, and suddenly, as soon as Donald Trump is elected, there's an article claiming that, according to some poll, now, we know now how inaccurate and how inflated these poll numbers are, because they were saying Clinton was going to win by a landslide. It turns out that was all lies. It was all statistical fabrication and distortion. Trump obviously won by a landslide, not Clinton.
Here's the point.
Here's the thing. Hold on a second. Let me finish this point. I see articles today claiming that 59% of Germans, according to a random sampling poll or whatever, they didn't even say it was random sampling. I don't know what the actual sampling was. That 59% of Germans want Merkel to run in 2017. I personally think that is a lie. I think the average German hates Merkel and knows that she destroyed their country, and that this is the establishment trying to push another Hillary Clinton over in Germany.
Exactly, yeah.
That's my view.
Okay, now I want to hear Harley's take on this, because I got your email this morning, so we're all connected. Everything's good, Harley. What do you think of what happened? Because this is way beyond Brexit. This is a sea change that's going to also inspire other countries like Italy, that was told recently that not going to be EU money for rebuilding their villages and their homes and their waterworks and so on by the people of Brussels. We have the banks in Europe being pushed to the edge of economic catastrophe. It was the Deutsche Bank in Germany. What do you see as this situation here, a rebuke to the elite globalists, which I'm sure that your organization, the LaRouche Foundation, has been fighting for decades, and now this is a major victory that'll open a door for pushing back and developing a form of rational international trade, rational cooperation, restabilize things so we're not at war with Russia. We can really truly get rid of ISIS. We can have a Europe that's not a super state, but a collection of nations that have collaborative trade, but also have some internal autonomy. What do you see happening?
Well, let me start by seconding what Matthew said. I think this is a revolution in motion, and the American people should be proud and honored that they did not fall for the lies and the propaganda, and this should teach a lesson, which it won't, to the pundits and the pollsters and the commentators who looked as though they were betrayed by the American people because the American people didn't listen to them. This is a rebellion, as you and I have been discussing for years,
right,
against the establishment in the United States. But in particular, and I spoke with Mr. LaRouche this morning, he said this was an absolute repudiation of the presidency of Barack Hussein Obama.
Exactly.
That Obama went to North Carolina. North Carolina was the key state. And let me just tell you from my insight on the election, if you look at what happened in North Carolina, you see what happened nationally. The polls had Hillary up by 4 points. Trump made a decision 3 weeks ago, after consultation with some of his top advisors, that if he were going to win, he had to drop some of the stuff he was doing, the Twitter, things of that sort, and focus on 3 major points. Anti-Wall Street, and in particular, for Glass-Steagall and against Dodd-Frank,
right,
and against bailouts. Secondly, against all free trade agreements, which the globalists want. And third, against Obama and Hillary Clinton's wars, including against their attacks on Russia, Putin, and so on.
Right.
And Trump gave a speech in Charlotte, North Carolina, which you and I discussed last week, where he very powerfully went through those points one by one, and then he finished with something that I was not expecting, which was talking about Make America Great Again as we were with the space program in the 1960s.
Yeah.
So there's the optimism, the LaRouche card, the Reagan optimism, whatever you want to call it. Now, what happened is Obama picked up that North Carolina was shifting because of this. And at Trump's speech in Charlotte, there were leaders of the African American community there. So Obama personally went to Raleigh, North Carolina. Michelle Obama went to North Carolina twice. Hillary was there. And what happened? In the space of a week, the polls went from showing Hillary up by 4% to Trump winning a virtual landslide of almost 5% in North Carolina. The more people saw of the Obamas, the more they turned to Trump. So I think, first of all, this is a total repudiation of everything Obama stands for. Secondly, in terms of the international, the further you get away from the transatlantic, the more enthusiastic the world is. The Egyptian president was cheering today. Putin sent a note of congratulations to Trump. The Chinese said, well, there have been a lot of things said on both sides, but we welcome the chance to sit down and talk with you. The Malaysian prime minister, who was just in China and who was being pushed by Obama to turn against the Chinese, issued a very strong statement saying that we hope with Trump the era of U.S. interventionism will be over. So you had a series of these kinds of comments. Now, what do you get inside Europe? You get panic. I mean, Merkel said she's willing to work with Trump. Well, we'll see whether that's true or not. But the European system is collapsing, just as the U.S. system is collapsing.
Right.
And so the people in Europe who can think should take a deep breath and basically say, now it's our turn. It's our turn to throw out the elites, to throw out the EU bureaucrats, to throw out the bankers who are looting us and keeping us from rebuilding our country. I think, Dr. Bill, and you and I have had a lot of discussion on this. We've gone around and around on it. I think Trump, in the last 3 weeks, ran a magnificent campaign around these themes that LaRouche has been discussing for years. And I think most importantly, this was set the tone for his speech last night, which was a very beautiful speech. It actually was interesting because it brought my wife to tears to hear an American president say, we don't want to interfere in other nations' affairs. We want to be friends. We want to do business. We want to work together with countries. This is a chance for a change. There's work to be done. And what Lyndon said to me this morning is, now we've got to make sure that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is dead, and we've got to make sure that the lame duck session takes up the issue of Glass-Steagall. But with that said, I think it's a moment where the American people can be happy and now roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Yeah, here's the things that will happen in the first 100 days. Number one, he's going to have a special session of Congress and get rid of Obamacare. We just got our bill, and it's more than our mortgage, believe me. And this is pretty crazy here in California, considering how expensive it is to live here. What's happening is the backs of the middle class are not going to be broken; they're breaking right now. They can't afford. In fact, it was last year there was a report by business that a 7% rise in a cost in one state caused a 40% reduction in restaurant visits. This year, the average is 25%, they say, which I think is ridiculously low. The average is probably more like 50% or close to it. Some states, like Arizona, is 116%. This means what we're going to have is much, much more dangerous. The economy is about to crash, and I believe that, and I think it was that my comment was stolen by Alex Jones, one of the last of his 52-hour mega broadcast. I've been saying for months, along with you, that if Trump gets in, the very first thing the globalists are going to do is to trash the economy, try to bring us to the brink of war, and to bring enough chaos that he can't accomplish, because he's the first Republican president that has the trifecta. He has the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress, so he can accomplish what he needs to get this country going, to restabilize, to prevent war with Russia, to stabilize the Middle East, to stop regime change, to work on the Silk Trail that LaRouche has been working on, and collaborate with LaRouche and the wise people over there, rather than the issues that happened through previous governments that even imprisoned Lyndon LaRouche, even though Ronald Reagan collaborated with him to talk about Star Wars and SDI. So what I see happening is a whole new vista of hope that we will rebuild America as a great nation and a good nation, a kind nation. And, I want to reassure people, especially young people, that, to be honest with you, by and large, except for my son Matthew, are not very wise. They're in a panic over the media slaughter that have convinced a lot of Hispanic people that they're going to deport 11 million people. He made it very plain right from the very beginning. He's going to make a big door on that wall. What he was saying is, I need to deport the criminals, the MS-13 gangs. I need to have a wall so that illegals can't waltz across the border and commit a felony, kill someone, and then go back. Some of these people were back and forth 7, 8 times before they killed someone or committed a major felony or rape. Secondly, we're going to make sure the nations that won't take their people back, we won't allow them to have visas to come here, and they're going to go to prison. And then he talked about the idea of places like Chicago. You go to the gangs and they have an illegal gun. They don't even need to commit a crime. Having an illegal gun means you go to prison, federal prison for 5 years min, plus tack on sentences for any crimes they're committing. That will clear the streets so it'll be safe for people in their inner cities. Trump is going to clean the latrine as well as empty the swamp. And I hear comments by people here in Hollywood that they're going to leave the country. For God's sakes, leave. We don't need you and we don't want you. Number two, a number of people here are threatening Trump and saying they're going to assassinate him. If I get word that anybody out there is assassinating you, you won't have 2 heartbeats left before we take you out. I guarantee you, we're not going to tolerate this. Our police, our military, and our agencies at the FBI, I want to give them full powers and metadata to track anybody that on Twitter or Facebook or any other social media dares to suggest they're going to harm our president. If they do, I want the FBI and our military and our forces to apply the full force of intelligence and grab these SOBs. So your comments, Matt, what do you think?
For example, there are protests going on in Oregon where they are burning American flags. Believe it or not, they are burning American flags.
You live in Portland. You live in Portland.
In Oregon, yes.
Yeah.
And here in Oregon, yes, they are burning American flags. The same thing's happening in Oakland, California.
Right.
Disgraceful behavior. No matter how much of a critic you are of America's government foreign policy, I'm very critical myself of our foreign policy over the years. This kind of treasonous behavior is just despicable. I wanted to say something else about the win of Trump, is I think this evidence is that in part this belief in a black and Hispanic Democrat vote is false.
Right.
In my observation, I don't think that most blacks and Hispanics are liberals. I think that blacks in the inner city of, say, Washington, D.C., blacks in the inner city of some of these big cities in the north are Democrats. But I think that most blacks in this country live in the South, and most blacks in the South are Southern Baptists and agree with Trump on most issues. I think the average American black is not a liberal and is a relatively conservative Baptist. I think it's the same thing with Hispanics. I think most Hispanics in this country are Catholic, and the Catholic Church is the most anti-abortion organization on the planet.
Right.
So how can you say that these? I can't believe the way that they tried to target the minority vote. I think that the Clinton campaign made a big mistake here. Not only did they try to target minorities as their voters, and they tried to target women, but they also alienated white males. They alienated working white men who traditionally are the main voters for the Democrat Party, because what they want is fair wages and benefits.
Exactly.
So,
in other words,
I think
they actually destroyed their own base, is what you're saying.
They destroyed their own base by going after the wrong people and by alienating their own potential voters.
Amazing. Back in a moment with Harley Schlanger from Berlin, Germany, and Matthew Deagle. We'll be back in a moment. And calling in today, I think later, we will have Jim Fetzer and Dr. Bob Thiel will be on hour number 3. Your calls are welcome, 800-313-9443. And again, I believe this was stolen by Alex Jones on the end of his 52-hour mega broadcast. But it's good. I mean, and people are getting good ideas, and they're realizing that the masters of chaos, which brought in all these movie stars and globalists and George Soros. And by the way, I'm pretty certain there was a lot of voter fraud on the side of the Democrats. We know that from the Project Veritas. But it wasn't enough to overcome the massive movement of Trump supporters. But this issue can be certainly stopped through the crash in the world economy with Glass-Steagall, and they need a Congress here in America needs to put it in right away. They also need to put it in European countries, because you can guarantee that they want to destroy the actions of the presidency. The first time since 1928 that the president had the Congress and Senate that's a Republican. And if we get Glass-Steagall in, it'll prevent them from blowing up the economy and paralyzing the U.S. government.
Well, and here's the way that could happen. The threat to the economy is very real.
Right.
And it could be whether Deutsche Bank goes under or whether there's a collapse of derivatives of Bank of America, Citibank, any of these banks.
Right.
The financial system is extremely fragile. The British banks are fragile. Now, Trump has an opportunity. What I think is important is that Paul Ryan had to look at the vote and say, oh, my God, now I have to make a choice. I've got to work with Trump. Because Ryan was meeting with Obama to plan pushing through the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Exactly. There are a group of Republicans, including Marco Rubio of Florida, Ted Cruz, whose wife helped write the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They're a group of rotten, scummy Republicans who still want to stick with the Obama plan, the globalist plan.
It's not really an Obama plan. It's a George Soros globalist plan, and they have plans in the Republicans and Democrats, which is why Poppy Bush, and it's not because he's a grandpa, it's because he supported the poppy groves in Afghanistan, supports the Hillary Clinton just because she's on the same side of these globalists. And
they backed Hillary.
Marco Rubio and these other characters are basically trying to, and that's why, I think one of the first actions, although in the last few days, Ryan actually said he came behind Trump, he had to save face, but the fact is he needs to go. I know a lot of people say that
Bill, let me make the point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Trump has the authority now. He has the power now. He can go to Ryan and say, either you back me or we're going to throw you out. And he can do that.
Right.
Now, Ryan, in the last 24 hours, said, oh, no, we're not going to bring up the TPP. It may be the Trans-Pacific Partnership is dead because of this election. But what Trump should do is then go to the Congress. He should go to people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, John McCain, who's a co-sponsor, Walter Jones, the North Carolina Republican, and say, let's pull together on a bipartisan basis an anti-Wall Street coalition to push through Glass-Steagall.
Oh, I agree.
If they do that,
I think as he pivots, he's one of the few politicians that will reach out to the Democrats, including Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and do something to get this damn thing done to stop this catastrophe from happening. Because I guarantee,
and this is what the voters want. That's why the voters voted for him, because of his uncompromising attitude toward Wall Street. So let's take this momentum that actually was there in 2008. If Obama weren't a traitor, we could have had Glass-Steagall back in 2008. Instead, we had 8 years. 8 years of lost ground in the U.S. economy, and people who lost ground and lost their houses and lost their savings, they voted for Trump on Tuesday. And Matthew's absolutely right about one other thing. The African-American turnout was down by 1 to 2% from 2012, which means African-Americans were not enthusiastic about Obama either. It's absolutely the case. They reject Obama.
They were intelligent people that wanted safe cities. They wanted schools that are under their local controls, and they want to be able to send them to charter schools. They want their kids to get degrees in technical training so they have a future, can own a car and a home and have a family. They're no different than anybody else.
And they don't want wars.
Right.
They don't want wars, and they don't want bailouts.
They're like any other American. Who cares if their skin color is a little different? It's ridiculous to say.
Well, and they're conservative. I mean, they're conservative. I think the vast majority of blacks in this country live in the South, and they're Southern Baptists, just like most Hispanics are Catholic. You think they're going to vote for Clinton, who openly called partial birth abortion acceptable during her debate speech? I don't think so.
No, and not only that, 93% of abortionists who do first trimester abortion don't support late-term abortion. We're talking about abortionists that do the procedures. Okay? So, this is just amazing. The rebuke by the public, by Americans, and the ones that don't get it, that voted for Hillary, you need to start reconsidering and rethinking and get it. Come together with us and say, let's solve these problems now, including Bernie Sanders, people who voted for Trump, policy in place immediately to prevent economic chaos, which the Chaos Masters want to do, war, and the other things that the global Chaos Masters want to do, and how we can not only encourage Europeans who are basically facing parallel problems, will look on what happened in America with this election, say they'll be encouraged to do what they need to do to improve trade with Russia and with each other, to fix the financial problems rather than pulling Deutsche Bank's a Jenga stick, and to actually address collaboration to get rid of ISIS rather than buying their oil and encouraging them by their inaction. It's just mind-boggling what's been going on with Hillary campaign, with WikiLeaks and Project Veritas and everything else. These people take corruption to a point where they really don't care a rat's behind if it kills millions of Americans, destroys the world economy, as long as they can ride the wave. It's amazing.
Well,
please tell us.
Let me say something about Europe and then about what we have to do in the U.S. On Europe, very quickly, this caught everybody's attention because everyone, Merkel, Hollande in France, they all thought that Hillary was going to win. Now they're facing insurgencies in their own parties, with new parties coming up. We're seeing an incredibly unstable world, and it's sort of summarized by a headline in Der Spiegel, the leading news weekly in Germany. It was saying, now with Trump, the instability begins. And my reaction to that was to say, what do you think's going on in the world now? The world is unstable now. We have a chance to stabilize it. Now, here's what the American people have to do. It wasn't enough to pull the lever for Trump or to file absentee or whatever you did to make Trump president. We've got to make sure the agenda is carried out.
Right.
The agenda is crushing the power of these elites, this Wall Street, City of London establishment. Crush it. You do that with Glass-Steagall. Then you follow through with what Trump talked about in his late-night presentation last night, creating millions of decent jobs for Americans. You want to deal with the problem of poverty in the white working class, the unemployed African Americans, the Hispanic community. Let's go with massive infrastructure programs that are not make work and they're not these silly solar cells and things of that sort, but
like
they're
Solyndra.
Hard infrastructure.
They don't
like
learn.
Solyndra.
Exactly. The point is, as I said, if Hillary, and I explained this to my pilot friend next door to me in our gated community, and I said to Andy, I said, Hillary, if she was a pilot, she'd be banging with her stick against the altimeter while she could see through a window that the ground is coming up. I mean, they don't change. They're so dogmatic. They don't change their course or their actions. They stick to dogma even if it's self-destructive. It's just...
Yeah, it's very
and then they attack Trump when Trump changes a position on something based on new evidence.
Right.
The thing you want in a leader is someone who's not stuck in a position, but someone who has principles, but is capable of adjusting to changes in the strategic situation, which Obama and Hillary were not. But to just finish my point, and then I know Matthew wants to say something. The point is, we didn't complete the job. We gave a real beating to Obama, to the Lindsey Grahams, the Bush family, to the Clinton organized crime family in the Democratic Party, but they're still there. They still control media. They control the banking system. They control the Federal Reserve. We've got to take that power away from them. That's why Glass-Steagall is so important, that it will take away the ability to run a speculative economy and to use the spillover money to buy votes. Secondly, put people to work, give them incentives to look to the future of buying a home, of sending their kids to college. And then you create the optimism that's necessary to deal with things like the drug plague. And third, work with people like Putin, with the Chinese. They're coming to Obama over and over saying, let's work together. And Obama says, but you're aggressive. You're a warmonger. We don't want to work with you. Well, Trump won't say that. If we could work with Putin in Syria, Al-Qaeda and ISIS could be crushed within a month. That's the estimate of the top German counterterror official who was on television the other day saying that Obama has sabotaged the opportunity to win this fight. So in Europe, there are people who recognize a change in the United States is good for Europe. And I think people like Hollande, the president of France, who's somewhere in the single digits in the polls, Merkel is slipping. Merkel's a smart enough politician to change her course, but I think she's worn out her welcome. There have to be changes of a monumental sort, but the stage is already set for that. Now, finally, the final point, we don't have to start from scratch. The Russians and the Chinese and the Indians have already begun the process of setting up an alternative financial system outside of the control of Wall Street and London. Right. The president of India, Modi, sent a note of congratulations to Trump and said, let's get together as soon as possible. Around the world, people are looking at the United States in awe and saying, look what the American people did. They just ended a corrupt dictatorship because the Bush regime, the Obama regime, used the Patriot Act and other war on terror, phony operations to set up a dictatorship. Hillary would have consolidated. That's been defeated.
Right.
And so we have the opportunity now. I would encourage every one of your listeners to call your congressman tomorrow, and tell them, now that we have this change in the country, let's get Glass-Steagall in right now. That's what I think people have to do.
Besides that, number 2 and 3 are number 2, we need to repeal Obamacare and put an immediate closure to the border, which, by the way, the wall was voted on in 2005 by Hillary. They just need to make certain that we have a rapid and an intelligent immigration system. Giving a good example, the Chinese took Bombardier out of Quebec and they advanced the technology for high-speed rail. It's estimated in the next 10 years they'll have upward of 40,000 miles in China of high-speed rail. We don't have 1 mile. What we should do is we should allow either work visas or even immigration of some of these high-top engineers to come to our schools and get us going to build high-speed rail. We need to collaborate on technology. For example, one of the WikiLeaks that I know is coming is they're going to release information about this red dwarf star that's producing gravity waves, that's increasing volcanism on all of the inner planets, and increasing solar activity of a dangerous possible coronal mass ejection. We need to have international scientific collaboration to protect our planet from solar and galactic events that do happen periodically that are dangerous, including high-velocity objects that pass. I took care of employees at U.S. Space Command, and in 1994-95, when I was there with CECOM and Schriever Air Force Base, we were only picking up 4% of what we call city crasher objects in space. We need to realize that collaboration with our scientific and engineering and technical community can make the Earth a safer place that has a higher carrying capacity for the population of Earth, rather than the policies of PNAC and the globalists that want to kill 90% of the population from lies like carbon credits and all sorts of other foolishness. What we need...
And Bill, the important thing is we now know the American people are on our side.
Right.
But the American people have to know, don't just vote, get out and work to make this country. If you want to make it great again, you have to do it. Don't wait for Trump to do it.
No. In fact, Donald Trump has gotten this introductory card. It must be us that get our congressmen to get Glass-Steagall, to get the border closed, to actually stop allowing potential terrorists to come in, to allow the FBI to have metadata to grab people with Twitter and Facebook that are potentially going to do what I call pre-terrorism, so we can grab them beforehand. They can monitor imams in mosques to make sure that they're not growing a new crop of American-made terrorists that are first or second generation. We need to realize that we have all the tools.
Besides that, we have to also, as we discussed during the break, Trump has to address the agitators and the lunatics in his own party as well as in the Democrat Party.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's not just Clinton who's been trying to start World War III here. It's also Lindsey Graham and John McCain in particular.
Talk about it, Matt.
Lieberman.
Let's talk about that.
These guys,
they're no different than Clinton. In fact, the thing is that came out of this election cycle is we realize that the establishment, including globalist establishments like George Soros, who's a wanted criminal in Britain and elsewhere that can't go there, he's persona non grata, that there is literally one snake party, and it has a Republican component and a Democratic component and a globalist component. And we have to realize this, that there's as many evil Republicans that tried to deep six...
exactly.
Go ahead, Matt.
Cruz. These guys are essentially of the exact same ideology behind the scenes as Clinton. And that ideology, I think they are sick enough that they want Islamic terrorists to come into our country as an excuse to bring in surveillance. To use all the surveillance they developed under Bush.
Precisely.
And they don't want a solution. They want war with Russia because they want world domination. They want an Arctic crisis.
Well, they want to. You're right. They want to end the potential of the BRICS. And you mentioned McCain. This is important. McCain has been on a toot for the last 3 years of regime change in Moscow.
Right.
And I think sooner or later Putin is going to look at McCain and say, "John, you want to change regime? Come on over here as an army of one." Because Putin is riding 80% popularity in Russia. McCain who knows what he did to get reelected, but I'm sure there was some vote fraud to make sure he got back in. But Matthew, you're absolutely right. It's not a partisan issue. The dividing line is elites, globalists, financial swindlers versus the majority of the American people and the majority of the world's people who want an opportunity to have a good, peaceful life that means something.
Right.
Yeah, and not to be destroyed in a nuclear holocaust, which is what might happen if Clinton were elected. She was literally already, even before she was elected, already calling for military retaliation for the so-called cyber attacks, for which there wasn't even a shred of evidence, by the way.
Yeah, that's
WikiLeaks has nothing to do with Russia. But I mean, I think Graham and McCain, honestly, I think they need to be in jail. These guys have committed the crime of treason, in my opinion. They're a huge threat to national security. You think what's a bigger threat to national security than trying to provoke a war with a nuclear superpower? I think there's hardly any bigger.
Some of the more dangerous ones are ones that tie this international globalist policy and shroud it in saying that they're really activists, like Ted Cruz, with a religion. And that's particularly toxic, that he wants to tie it into a religious issue, which is not true at all. And what we have is
Cruz saying he wants to carpet bomb civilians during his campaign. Then Trump is controversial for saying he wants to use waterboarding. But obviously, this is the problem here is that we have to fight terrorism, we have to fight ISIS, but we can't give in to the demands of these lunatics who want to have a totalitarian surveillance state, because that will ultimately lead to the concentration of power they want, so they can totally do away with democracy altogether.
No, that's absolutely right, and that's why the question of Glass-Steagall is, how do you take power away from these guys? They still have power despite what happened with the election. But if we get Glass-Steagall through, and I'm not trying to be a one note on this thing, this represents the means by which you bring the banking community, the financial elites of the Goldman Sachs and the JP Morgans, you bring them under control. And you put the ones who are the corrupt ones in prison. Trump needs to make sure he has a Justice Department which doesn't do what Obama did, which is cover up for these criminals. Right. Now, if you start doing that, you not only take away their power, but you put the fear of God in the bankers. Maybe they'll start loaning money to people who want to set up businesses and people who want to bring in new technologies, as opposed to drug dealers and arms dealers.
We talked about this before, Harley, that there's principles in finances that are unfortunately missed, I think, in Economics 101. There's the velocity of money, but there's also the velocity of credit. And with derivatives markets, which is caused by the lack of Glass-Steagall, the velocity of money and the velocity of credit is literally dropped for small business, tool and die, and expansion of real economy is literally gone to a trickle. And so
but if you want to create risky gambles, there's the Federal Reserve will pour money into your pocket.
Right, and not only that, it's usually in a funny money economy. There's nothing being produced. It's all amalgamation or consolidation of corporations. It's all ridiculous. And some guy that may have some wonderful device in his garage or in his part-time work at a certain company, he can't get the money to finance to start hiring employees. And with things like Obamacare, he wouldn't dare. He'll go bankrupt trying to develop his product. So,
well, this is our opportunity, and we've got to make sure we stay focused. And by focused, I mean there's so many things that have been wrong with the last 15, 16 years, last 30 years. But if we pick the few topics that get at the heart of things and make sure we stay focused on that.
You're like a geopolitical surgeon. You're like a brain surgeon on the brain of the economy, saying, look, the chief surgeon is Lyndon LaRouche. You're the surgeon's main surgical assistant. You're going to go in and remove this, called meningioma that's about to crush a major blood vessel in the brain of the economy. And that meningioma, it's called, the surgical instrument is called Glass-Steagall. And once you remove that tumor, things are going to start flowing. Things are going to start fixing because you just remove that, and it's like, oh, there's blood flow to the parts of the brain, so the person can start walking again.
I think we need to not only have Clinton indicted for her email for crimes there, but I think we also have to have people in the Bush administration who were criminally negligent about 9/11. They had foreknowledge of 9/11 6 months in advance to release three CIA officers. The officers didn't make enough of an alarm about it. Bush himself.
But Matt, it goes even beyond that. It goes beyond that.
I think they should all be in jail for criminal negligence and for their war crimes in Iraq, where they didn't supply sufficient troops. Rumsfeld should be in jail for not deploying enough troops, despite the warnings of dozens of generals that they had.
They should deploy more.
Troops they needed.
But here's the point: with the current JASTA law that allows them to go after Saudi Arabia, the Saudis this summer said America did a self-inflicted wound with 9/11. It was a war game that went live. And while George Bush was reading an upside-down book about a pet goat in a school, grammar school
the point
in Florida.
My point is that what you can do is you can actually charge them with the crimes of gross criminal negligence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
Because the facts are there. Like, the conspiracy theories go very far, but we don't know. We don't have proof of that. We have proof that they had foreknowledge and they didn't act on it.
Oh, no, we got proof.
And we know that they lied.
No.
We know that they
Matt,
lied.
I have proof.
They covered up.
Yes.
No, we got proof. I have a 1998...
Not legal proof. We don't have proof in a court of law. We have
yes, I do, actually. Yeah, on my website, Clay and Iron, I have a 1998... Now, stop. I have a 1998 document from a Finnish munitions expert contracted by the Port Authority of New York City to actually create a demolition plan using micronukes and RDX to destroy the World Trade Center towers.
But the point is that stuff is never going to hold up in a court of law. The point is that we
Sure it is. I got the actual documents. You can download it yourself, 34-page PDF.
I'm saying be strategic. Just like Harley was saying earlier, you have to be strategic. You can't be ideological. You have to be strategic.
I'm not being ideological. There's tons of evidence that 9/11
strategically, you have to charge them with criminal negligence.
I have first-hand names of people
Bill,
in Space Command.
I got to run, so I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. First-hand names of people
nice talking
in
with
Space
you,
Command.
Matthew.
Matt, we're going to be on the next segment, so stay right there. Thank you, Harley. We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Congratulations, President Trump. I call him now. Simba has now become the chief lion. How's that? I held that baby the other day, so stay there, Matt. We'll be right back.
With gross criminal negligence for deploying insufficient truth numbers.
I agree.
Bush needs to be in jail.
Yeah, we're on break now, Matt.
Acting on
we're on break now, Matt. Welcome back, and Matthew, we have the segment. I want you to present what you talked about on the break, because I think it's very critical as to what needs to happen next.
Yes, I know you've spoken with Roger Stone. I hope you still have his number. You can still communicate with him so we can talk to Trump about this, because Trump is president now. We have to use this to get these people prosecuted for their crimes, namely the most dangerous people in the USA, in my estimation. The most dangerous people we know about, at least. Maybe there are some worse people in some kind of intelligence agency, 17th Intelligence Agency Clinton was talking about, but these people in particular. I know who is principally legally responsible for 9/11, Condoleezza Rice. She was National Security Advisor when they got the intelligence on the coming terror attack by Al-Qaeda and did not act on it. Condoleezza Rice, therefore, needs to be in jail for gross criminal negligence as National Security Advisor. Donald Rumsfeld needs to be in jail for gross abuse of office, criminal negligence in particular, criminal negligence in regard to his deploying of insufficient troops to Iraq, despite the warnings of several strategists and generals that he could never win the war with only the troop numbers he had. He needed at least twice.
You need to have double the troops in order to accomplish it. Yeah.
Yes. Lindsey Graham needs to be in jail for his agitations against Russia, his disturbance of the national security of this country by trying to provoke a war with a foreign power, trying to bring a war on our country that may destroy our country physically. John McCain needs to be in jail for similar reasons. Hillary Clinton needs to be in jail for threatening national security by using a private email server for official business. She needs to be in jail for that. All these people need to be in jail for either...
But also for what she did in Libya. I mean, the regime change in Libya, which he managed, and the situation in Syria is a direct result of her.
That's a huge crime, but it'd be more difficult to prosecute her for. I think the things we can prosecute them for are Condoleezza Rice, criminal negligence; Hillary Clinton, criminal negligence; Donald Rumsfeld, criminal negligence. You see, if you are operating a crane and you kill 10 people because you mishandled a crane, of course you're going to go to jail, at least for a misdemeanor, for at least for a minor felony. I mean, that manslaughter charge. You're not going to go to jail for life necessarily, but you're at least going to have a manslaughter charge because it's criminal negligence. When you commit a crime by accident, it's criminal negligence. And I think we can prove that all of them have committed crimes at least by accident. That's why we have to charge them with gross criminal negligence and get a maximum sentence on that charge. All of these things are criminally negligent. It's as simple as that. Forget about, you can endlessly theorize about what happened on 9/11. You can endlessly theorize about what they're doing behind the scenes, but you can't prove it. What you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that Condoleezza Rice is grossly criminally negligent for letting 9/11 happen. You can prove that Donald Rumsfeld was grossly criminally negligent for deploying insufficient troops to Iraq. You can prove that Hillary Clinton was grossly criminally negligent for using an unsecured server for official business as Secretary of State. All those things are provable negligence. And negligence can carry a severe sentence depending on how severe the negligence is. Just look it up in Black's Law Dictionary. That's what she's criminal. That's what she's responsible for.
Yeah, I think
negligence.
it's easier to prove 9/11, though. It's not a conspiracy theory.
One word, negligence. So you need to talk
I
to
think you're right. You're
Donald
talking
Trump.
about the low-hanging fruit of prosecuting them.
You need
but
to
I
talk.
believe
You need to get the message to Trump as soon as possible to try these people for negligence.
I agree, and not only that, it needs to put the fear of God into people that could try to cause trouble down the road, like Ted Cruz and his like Ted Cruz and his wife, who were collaborating in PNAC, the Project for the New American Century.
Yeah.
A number of other people in the Republican Party, including George Bush Sr. and Jr.
In